Hi, everybody. It's Carol from Healthcare Potholes with Christian Faith. I'm going to talk a little bit about messengers. I sort of talked a little bit in the last clip about a messenger from God called Daniel from the lion den. Well, this one was a little different. First of all, when you have someone approach you that starts talking about, well, gee, your mom's rhythm wasn't in her will, then you better start paying attention that they are a messenger from God. I have been around doctors a long time, all my life practically, from birth on. And I never had a doctor talk about wills. Even when my patients were sick and had coded and came back and I was taking care of them, I never had a doctor go in and say, well, that rhythm you had, that was AFib, wasn't it? I never had a doctor say that. So I don't know. Maybe we need to start having doctors say that. I'm just teasing. But it was a shock. So I'm saying, when they start talking about wills and they start talking about certain things, or they just all of a sudden show up when you're stranded in the middle of no man's land and they're there, you know that they are messengers from God. And so it's kind of one of those things that, wow. And so where to start? Well, okay, let me back up. The day before Good Friday, I was driving home from the hospital and I had a call from my nephew Jordan after I had spoke to him in length about my brother needing stem cell and that Mayo had closed their stem cell program for ALS. And I had asked the doctors if they knew of anybody, and they were going to check over at U of M and different places around downtown Detroit, DMC, and different places. So they were doing their checking around for me, and I was driving home thinking, okay, we got this nailed. We'll find a stem cells, and we'll be able to pull my brother around maybe. So that's where I was thinking in my mind when I left the hospital that evening. And then I got a call as I was on Michigan, which is one of the busiest roads besides Ford Road, where I live. And he called and he said that Ray was down. And I about stopped the car and he had an 18-wheeler plow into me. Well, I managed to get off to the side of the road onto Getty's Road. And I continued down till I got to Kroger's parking lot and I pulled in and I finished my conversation. And he said that they were working on my brother Ray. And I says, "You've got to be kidding. They're working on him?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, take the phone over and let me talk to him." So he put the phone up to his ear like I wanted to talk to him. He thought that was really crazy. And I told Ray to stop talking to Jesus to come back to his family. And he did. They got a faint pulse at that point, and he had been almost down, I think it was close to 20 minutes by that time. So time was of the essence. So they got him up to the hospital and did what they had to do. And the other boys flew in and different things. And so they were very busy, and we didn't hear back later at all. And we were sitting on eggshells waiting to find out what was going on, not knowing. And so the next morning, I got up and got dressed and was heading down to the hospital. It was Friday, and I had to have my IV, and I had to be there by 10. And so I was driving in the car, and I said, God, I'm having a really difficult time handling all this stress. I just can't handle it anymore. I need someone to help me through this. I know you sent Daniel from the lion den, but I had no idea my brother was this bad. And I need to send prayers for him. I need to send prayers for my mom. I just don't know. This is just more than I can handle, God. And so I continued to turn my car onto Michigan Avenue off of Canton Center Road. And all of a sudden, I looked up in the sky, and there was all these bright rays going across the sky. And my mom and I, when we were in the car, we used to say, "Oh, God's taken someone very special up." Now you can imagine my anxiety not knowing if it was my brother or if it was my mom, because they both were fighting for their life at the time. And so I got down to the hospital and I'm sitting there getting my IV, thinking about these rays in the sky that were just brilliant. I mean, the whole sky was just like massively lit up with these rays going up. And I always said, when someone dies and you see that they're one special person going up to heaven to be with God. So I was focusing on that, and in walks my mom's radiation oncologist. And my mom had a lot going on with her. She had tongue and throat cancer. Never smoked a day in her life, never hardly drank, was a clean cut individual, Christian. How did she get this? Well, she had breast cancer. And each one of her sisters ended up with breast cancer, and they all ended up with a secondary form of cancer. One ended up with liver cancer, ended up with lung cancer. Both had passed from that. Then my mom ended up with tongue and throat, and they all three had breast cancer. And two of their kids have had breast cancer. My cousin has had breast cancer, and I've had breast cancer. So I had mine back in the late 80s. So I was very young. I had ductal carcinoma. And so, anyhow, to make a long story short, there was also microcalcification that had changed, and that was the start of it. And anyhow, so with my mom, she had tongue and throat cancer and was having radiation. They put a port in and a feeding tube, and they were going to do radiation after radiation. They were going to do chemo, and then see where we were at. And then her foot doctor was following a callus that had all of a sudden cleared up, and they couldn't find where it had went. He was always suspicious it went somewhere in her body, but didn't know where. And it was MRSA. And so it had gone to her buttock. And then the MRSA hit her pacemaker. But they had opened up her buttock 2 fist sizes. She had to have a colostomy put in so that area would stay clean, and then she had to have it packed, and she was in a lot of pain with that because they had taken so much muscle and tissue. And I didn't think they were going to open her that much. I was like shocked, to be honest with you. And then they were trying to blame me that it was a decube, and no, she was up walking around at home when she went into the hospital. So it wasn't anything I did. So, and her doctors that were caring for her, that knew that I didn't do any of the above. So, anyhow, her radiation oncologist came down to see me at infusion and decided to stop her radiation. So it was too much for her. He was just going to stop it. So I had the nurses call her oncologist when I got up to the floor to talk to them and to see what he had to say about this. And why wasn't this discussed with the family and my mom, that type of thing. So anyhow, I was sitting in her room and I got a call from Jason that they were going to take Ray off of life support. If they kept him on life support, he'd be on life support in a wheelchair, and what kind of life is that? And I kind of agreed and said, okay, you got my permission, and we're keeping you in our thoughts and prayers, and that's all I can do. I can't be there because I have to be with Grandma because she's really bad. And so anyhow, after that, I was just, devastated. And 30 minutes later, in walks Adult Protective Services. Talk about feeling beat up on Good Friday. I really felt like I was being beat up. So the adult protective service guy walks in, and I chewed him out, spit him up, mowed him over. I was not a nice girl at all. I was not Christian. I let my Christianity at the doorway when this all happened, unfortunately. And so I really let him have it between the eyeballs, and he left. And I mean, I bawled and I bawled and I bawled and I bawled. And in walks my mom's oncologist. Now, he knew me right after I got done as a student nurse and graduated, and that was my first job down there where my mom was at it's now the Bowman system, but now it's Corwell, I think, or Wellcore, something like that. So it used to be Oakwood when I worked there. So anyhow, he said, what's going on, Carol? And I told him that I had an adult protective services show up and tried to blame me for my mom's buttock wound. Well, I wasn't the surgeon that caused that. I wasn't the infection that caused it. It was not anything I did. She did not have a decube. And where they got that from, I have no idea because I didn't do it. She was up walking around and had no skin breakdown when she came into this place. And so he said, no. He says, you're good. You're a good nurse. I don't understand why they would do that. He said, that's just wrong. You don't go after good nurses. He said, let me go take care of this. Now, he was chief of staff at the time. So he went and took care of it. And he came back and he said, everything will be fine. You'll be fine. Everything will be fine. Don't worry about it. I took care of the doctor that did this. So I have no idea. I kind of have a couple hunches who it may have been, but I'm not 100%. So it may have been a couple of them. I don't know. But it was devastating for me to go through that. And, I had my brother I couldn't call and talk to. He was now clinically dead. And I had my mom that wasn't doing good that I could talk to. And I had been unable to reach my brother because he was with a client, and it just went on and on and on, and I was just so devastated and crying buckets. And I said, God, I need someone to help comfort me. So I got into the elevator, and I don't even remember my drive home that day, to be honest with you. It was just a grace of God that he took the wheel and got me home. I got into the elevator, and the next floor down, two African American girls got on, and they had their Bible, their notepad, their pen, and their concordance. It's like, wow. And one had gotten sort of behind me, and I said, I really need some comforting. I've had a rough day. And I told them what had happened. I lost my brother, and my mom wasn't doing good, and it looked like I was going to lose her, and because they stopped her radiation. And then someone reported me to Adult Protective Services when I didn't do anything wrong, and I'm being victimized. I said, and this is Good Friday, and I can't handle anymore. And so they wrote the list down of comfort verses, and she handed it to me. And then they walked with me all the way down to where I went to go get my car from valet, and they went on down to the parking lot. And they gave me their church number where they were at and everything, and I turned around and they were gone. So I wanted to get directions. I was going to ask them for directions to their church, and they were gone, just like Daniel was. And so I got in the car and I said, well, they gave me a number. I'll call and see if I can get someone there before it gets any later. And I called, and the number had been disconnected. And they had given me a couple numbers, and all of them had been disconnected all the way down the list. And I thought, ooh, these are messengers from God again. I got to get out of this hospital. I mean, it was. They were messengers from God. I haven't ever seen them back down there. My mom had been in the hospital 4 months from the time she had collapsed at home. And, it just is really really something when you think about it. And I'm so blessed to have had these messengers in my life at the time that I needed them. And I managed to get home okay that night. I think God must have drove my car for me to get me home because I was no shape to really drive to come home. And when I got home, I had to tell him about Ray and my dad. They didn't want me to tell my mom right away because she was still coming off of her cardiac arrest, and I had to wait a little while to tell her that Ray had passed. And the doctors had to be there because they thought she may code again when I told her. So there was a lot of things that the rest of the family was unaware of that I wanted to make sure that they knew my side of the story because nobody has ever really talked to me about my side of the story. And we were all hurting as a family when we lost Ray. It was a double whammy losing my mom and Ray 2 months apart to the day. And, but I'm going to talk about another message from my brother Ray after he had passed. So, um, but God is good. God is faithful. He knows when we need help. He knows when we need it. And he don't just waste trips. That's another thing I want to say is he doesn't waste trips. Think about that. He doesn't waste trips. What does that mean? It means he knows when you're really in need and you have to really be in need to have things happen. Now, my brother runs around and says, I never seen an angel. I've never seen a messenger. I've never had this or that or this or that. Well, he may be one of the lucky ones or he may be just hasn't happened. And why does it happen to some people and not to others? I don't know. I think it's like how Jesus picked his disciples, you know? And so it's kind of, odd that some people have this and other people don't. So anyhow, I'm getting up to my 17 minutes, so I'm going to clip this off and I'm going to talk a little bit more. So I'm keeping this all going on my Saturday, so you may see me in the same shirt for a few clips. That's okay. It's because I'm doing quite a few at a time, so don't get bugged by it. I have changed my clothes. So. Okay. So anyhow, let me go and do another clip. Take care of my screaming Mimi in there, and we will be back in a few minutes. Have a good one.